Yep.
So
Thank you.
the EX15 is kind of our Swiss Army knife of a finished router product. It's got pretty much everything you need in it from an enterprise, firewall and router standpoint. As you can see right here, the box itself is pretty low profile. It's going to have 2 antennas. If it's a Cat 4, Cat 8, or Cat 6, Cat 7 radio, the Cat 18 radio itself actually requires 4 antennas. So you'll see 4 of these on the back. The front of it is going to look like this. There are 2 RJ45 Ethernet ports. So by default, the first one on the left is set up for LAN, and the one on the right is set up for WAN. This one's going to be PoE injectable, so the device itself has a little PoE injector that you can plug the power into, and then you can just power this device with an Ethernet connection over about 300 feet worth of cabling to any destination that has better internet than where you might be deploying it. We've also got a serial port right here. So if you need to do any like out-of-band management and connect into other firewalls, we also have an RS-232 serial port that can plug into that as well. The sides you see here are a SIM slot button and an erase button. The SIM slot button is just a little button you can press to move the SIM slot from SIM 1 to SIM 2. All of the radios that come capable with the device have 2 SIM slot ports on them. And the erase button just wipes the config off the box and returns it to factory default settings. And then this is the little barrel jack power supply that you get right here. On the back, this is where the radio plugs into the device. And so the radio itself is a little black box with the SMA connectors attached to them. The picture as you see here, essentially what you do is you slide the SMA or the radio after you put the SIM card into the box, put that flap on, and then you screw on the antennas, and then you're pretty much ready to go. Like I said, 2 SIM slots on that radio itself, and then depending on the variant of radio, the Cat 18 is the one that requires 4 antennas, and then the Cat 4 and the Cat 6 and the Cat 7 require 2 antennas. All right. Any questions about the EX15 itself from a hardware perspective before I start going into the portal? Take silence as a no, and we got it all.
No questions, apparently. Do you prefer people asking a question or maybe using the chat as another
Yeah, you can interrupt me as I go. I don't really mind. I tend to talk pretty fast, so if there's anything that I go over that you missed or you want to hear again, just interrupt me and we'll talk about it as we're going. So no worries there.
Thank you.
Yep. So for the portal aspect of it, essentially what happens is by default, all of these devices will attempt to connect to Remote Manager and pull a config from that portal. Normally what happens is the devices don't have an attachment to the portal out of the box. You have to go in and add the device to that portal. So I'll use our little staging organization that you see right here. So what you're going to get when you log in for the very first time is the dashboard. So this is going to say, hey, how many total devices do we have? How many are connected to the portal? The health status of the devices, any alerting that might be going on with the boxes, and then the signal strength graph, which will tell you the signal strength of all the devices that you see here. You can drill down into the portal and get more information by clicking on the devices tab. And this is going to have all of the devices in your deployment. It's going to show you at a snapshot if they're connected versus not connected, the device ID, which is an extrapolation of the MAC address, the group that it's assigned to, the actual MAC address, and then the firmware version that it's hooked up to. You can move over and see some more information here, like the cellular settings and all of that. But this is what you're going to be greeted with when you log into the portal for the first time. What we can do from here is we can click on the device ID or the MAC address of the box, and that's going to let us get some more information about the device itself. So I'll take one of these, click on the ID, and this is the information that we're getting, right? So it's going to tell you, hey, the box is currently connected versus disconnected, what IP we're getting off the device, the firmware version, the MAC address, if it's in compliance or not. Information over here that can be filled in is like the name of the device, and so we use this as like site IDs and where the device is currently located, what kind of fleet it's a part of, things like that. You can add some notes in here as well, like, hey, it's in the third ceiling tile from the front of the door or something like that. We've got the account that it's being applied to, and so the 32887 right here is going to be your account in Remote Manager. So if you have any questions involving like licensing and stuff, this is typically what we refer to about your device account ID, and that number is important. So remember that one. The group is where the box is applied to. And so what you can see here is on this little folder on the right-hand side of this, the intro page you get when you click on the devices, is the group that the devices are assigned to. And so with this is basically how you break everything down. The root group is the main group where everything is dropped into initially, but you can go in here and you can create the test group or whatever you want. You can see I've named it test 1, 2, 3, 4 a few times, and then you can chain it into whatever main group you have. So right now it would just be a part of the root group. If you have a group and you want to store a group inside of a group, you can almost nest it like a directory type view and say, hey, I want this to be under any one of these specific groups that you see here. And it'll just pop up and show up over here. And then once you click on that, you'll be able to see, hey, I have X amount of devices in this group. And that's really powerful because it changes to the group configurations, and we'll go over that a little bit later. But once that's done, you can click on the device again. Like I said, it tells you all the information about the device. The summary dashboard is going to be, hey, what's my connection history look like? So you can see here, hey, this box has been up and down for quite a long time. This is useful for troubleshooting, so you can see what the reason for the disconnection was, why it was disconnected, the hours of the day that it's in, and this will give you the last 30 days worth of information about the box. Once those 30 days elapse, you see it just kind of starts erasing it and starting over again. So as it grows and keeps going, this will start disappearing on the back end as well.
How do you
we
think,
have a question. We have a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that IP that you show in the last picture, yes, the, 10.0.0.1 is the one or LAN IP?
So for this one in particular, this is actually going to be the ancillary address of the device's LAN connection. And so this kind of happens when you have pass-through on. Typically, you get the IP address of the cellular connection that you're getting. And so the only reason this pops up is because it's typically in pass-through mode. So if I look at the network interface and go to LAN, you'll get the IP that it's currently referring to as, which is the pass-through mode ancillary addressing, which is what you see right here. And so typically you get the IP address that's from the cell connection, as that's like a 100 address or a 107 or 166, right, depending on what you're using. But then if it's in pass-through mode, you get the ancillary addressing unless you turn it off. So that's just something that we need to change on the portal itself. But yeah, it's going to be the cell IP if it's getting anything when the LAN connection is plugged in.
Okay.
Yep. So while we're on this page, the settings tab is going to be all of the information about the device itself. And what this means is you've got the full suite of settings that you can make changes and adjustments to, like you would if you had local access to the device, right? So you see I went in here, I can go into the modem interface. I can say, hey, let's use a specific APN to connect on a specific network. Let's go into those LAN settings. We'll go through and we'll say, hey, I want to use a specific DHCP address and then give it a server setting, right? So all of the information you can get from the specific device itself, if you were to log in locally, is available to you on the portal. And because of this, you have a full suite of options you can go and make changes to. The one big thing that I will caution against is the devices themselves. If they show that they are connected to the portal, they are indeed connected, and if you go in and make a setting change, it will immediately apply it. So like if I were to go in here and I were to say, hey, we're going to use, one of the Verizon static APNs, right? And I click apply on this device, this will immediately push to the box. And so some cautionary things are like if you're doing anything that messes with the interfaces, like the LAN, the WAN, the modem, all that stuff, the firewall will reload as those rules apply, and you'll lose the connection to the device momentarily to reapply the settings that you're doing. So just be cognizant of what you're making changes to if you do press this apply button, because the boxes are going to immediately take that change, and then it's going to happen as soon as you press that button, and the boxes are going to start doing what they're being told to do, essentially. All right, from there, we'll talk about the file system. And so with Remote Manager, you have access into some of the UI directories that's on the box. And so you see here, you can pull some logs from the device, like the messages folder. And this is just going to give you the last 1,000 lines of the events that are coming off the device. And so you can do this for troubleshooting, get the last information that we saw with the device. So if you're seeing things like, the APN is not passing or it's failing and the modem interface is reloading, it's a really good tool for troubleshooting. So you can get that information from the file directory. Some of the other things that we can do on here is we can add applications to this folder. And so if you have things like custom scripts in Bash or Python, this stores it in the etc config script section of the device, which we'll go into a little bit later to look at. But that's where you can store applications and scripts and different things onto the box itself if you need it. And this is just where everything is located and dropped off in. So if you don't know how to, go into the console and get that specific information from the device, it'll show up in those folders available. My favorite tool personally is the console, which is essentially direct SSH access onto the box, which is secured based on your login information. And so you can either use the admin or the shell CLI to, move around the box and get some more information from it. And so some common commands are like modem commands to see what the device is doing. So modem CLI will push things like, hey, tell me the kind of radio that I'm using. So I see it's a Telit Cat18, the firmware the radio is using, state's currently connected, LTE access for the kind of network it's connecting to, 100% signal strength. So this box is doing great. The bearer that it's on, which is going to tell me things like what APN are we using. And so I can push that information to get more off the box and say, hey, I'm using a broadband connection. I'm on IPv4. Here's my IPv4 information all right here. And then similarly, if you wanted to do that through like the admin CLI, you can go into admin and I can do like show modem name, and I think it's modem again. Yeah, and so it'll punch the same thing out through the admin CLI with a little more information like the 4G metrics and stuff like that. The nice thing about the admin CLI, again, is you can tab to complete everything. So it'll kind of walk you through it. With Shell, you kind of just have to know what the commands are. But yeah, so both really great ways to interface with the device. I think my favorite thing to do here is through the shell access. We can go into that log folder like we were talking about, which is var log. And from here, this is where we saw the messages that we just downloaded, right? And so from here, what we can do is we can generate a support report. So I can type gen support report, hit tab, it'll complete it, and then I can name it, test, and I just store it as a binary file. And what that'll do is that'll pull everything off the box and drop it off as a little repository that I can pull now from that folder that we were just in under the var log, under the file system. And essentially what that lets you do is you can say, hey, I'm having issues with the device. Here's my test binary that I just pulled. It's the support report from the box. And now remotely, you can get a support report off a device out in the field and pull it onto your desktop and then send that off to like tech support or something for them to look at. So very powerful tool, gives you a lot of management capabilities. And then, like I said, if you're familiar with shell-based command line interface, so like a Linux directory, and then admin CLI as well, if you've worked more with like Cisco's, you have a plethora of tools in there to troubleshoot and get the device going and see what's up with the boxes you're working with. From here, we have the data streams. And the data streams are just going to be strings of information that are pulled off the device. And so typically what this shows are like all the information about the number of connections that it has, the bytes and bits that have been transmitted and received on specific interfaces. And what's nice about this is that all of the API work that Remote Manager can handle is based off of these data streams. And so essentially you can go in and you can say, hey, I'm looking for this specific data stream. I want to push it to a managed service platform or pull the information from the box and get it as like an XML or a JSON format. Things like that are all done through the data streams. And so we have a little API Explorer down here that has a bunch of tools that you can use to say, hey, I want to run specific commands, or I want to, get specific information about the device. And then you can see the string it auto generates for you. And then you would throw like, the device ID or data stream at the end of it, and it would pull that information for you. And so the API work is pretty extensive. If you're familiar with all the APIs the portal can run, you can use this as your test playground and get the specific information that you're looking for. Yeah, a lot to do here. And it's all based on the device ID and the data stream from the one specific box, right? So everything you grab here is pullable and able to be used in the API Explorer. All right, I'll pause here because I know I went over a lot of stuff again. Is there anything else we want to see in particular, or anything we have questions about as I went through the specific device information? All right, I'll take that as a no, and we'll jump into our group configuration tab. So once you have your devices in the portal, they're all here, they're all reporting in, they're all checked in, we're all happy with it. We now want them to be compliant with the golden config we want to essentially assign to a device, right? And so to do that, first, we want to set them into specific groups. That's the big one, is assigning them to the group that we want the config to apply to. And then from there, we're going to make the group configuration. And so in the configurations tab, you see we have a bunch here already. The configurations have a few caveats to them. One is they are hardware specific. So like the EX15 is the firmware and the hardware are going to specifically denote a group configuration. So you see here we've got the EX15 and the EX15W. One has Wi-Fi, one doesn't. You cannot apply an EX15 config to an EX15W and vice versa. They're unique. So what you would need to do is you would say, hey, I want to create a config, name it test, whatever you want. Select the group that we're going to apply it to. So one of the groups that we're working with, we choose the device type. And so again, important based on what you have hardware-wise. Again, if it's something you don't own, right? If you don't have like an EX15W or an EX12 or any of these other boxes, they won't even show up for you to click on. So you won't get confused that way. But just know the differences between the hardware that you're working with. So I'll select the EX15, and then I'll select the firmware version. Again, hardware and the firmware are the identifiers that you have to apply. So there we go. We'll do 20.11. Save and continue. And then from here, what it'll do is it'll give me two options. It'll say, hey, do you want to use the default values to start this group config? Or do you want to take the config off of a device and apply that config that you've set up on your own? This is the golden config. This is what I want all my devices to replicate and do. And do I want to apply that to the group configuration? And so we can import from a device that's going in and working and make sure it works. So I don't think I have any devices applied to this group, which is why I didn't show anything. But all the devices that are assigned to this group that use this firmware would populate, and then you would pick a device in that group to pull the information from. So I'll use my default values for now. And so basically this is like I'm setting up a box brand new out of the box fresh. I can go in there and I can say, hey, our interface is going to be under the LAN settings. I'm going to want to, set it as pass-through mode, or I want to set it as IPv4 and choose the IP addresses that I want to hand off. And so you can go through and you can comb the settings and set it up exactly the way you want. Once that's done, we'll save it and we'll move on to the next portion, which is the file system. And then again, the file system is where we go in and we say, hey, do I need to add in a custom script? Do I need to put a Python application on here? Whatever, we'll drop that off into that respective folder. Once we've uploaded it into the application file. We'll hit continue, and then we'll choose the frequency at which the device checks in and pulls those settings from the portal. So our frequency right now is monthly, weekly, and daily. As part of the config itself, you can choose what time it pulls that config and gets the information from the portal. But we'll say, hey, check in daily. Alerting just means it's going to tell you, hey, the portal's going to send something out to inform you that this device is out of compliance. Remediate is what actually fixes the settings. And so if you want the settings to be applied to the device, make sure you click the remediate option. Reboot after remediation is exactly what it sounds like. It fixes the config and then it power cycles the box. And then enable scanning is just what turns on the scanning function on the portal to check at whatever frequency you denote to get the boxes back in compliance with the portal. So once this is all done, you'll hit save and your info will be stored down here. And so you see we've got the test config that we created applying to the Digi EX15 with the specific firmware we're applying to the box and only applying to the test group. This can be edited once it's done, so we can click actions and hit edit. You can add more groups to apply the config to. Just know that only one group can have one group config applied to it, so we can't mix and match. It's got to be 1 for 1 or 1 for 10, depending on however many groups you want to pull this config. So yeah, go through, edit it, change any settings. If you're unhappy with the group configuration, you can just go in and delete it right out of the portal. So we'll get rid of that test config right there, and then you're good to go. And you can start creating new ones as you go through it. So I'll ask once again, any questions about group configuration creation or how we go through and edit the settings for that? All right, I must be doing a good job because you guys are understanding really well.
One question. After we're gonna cover the alerts as well, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, never mind.
Yep.
Go ahead.
No worries. I was just about to do it. You read my mind. So now that we've got everything configured, the device is in the portal. It's got the right configs applied to them. Like you said, we want to be alerted as to what's going on with the devices and what we're getting. And so to do this, I like to use the older version of the platform because it's a little bit nicer. So you can click on the name in the right-hand side and hit Open Classic Remote Manager. And this is going to be the older splash page of the portal. It's the 2.0 view, essentially, is what we call it, instead of the 3.0, which is the newer one. And to set up alerting, you see we've got the alarm section right here. What you'll do is you'll hit Add, and then this is going to give you all of the different kinds of alerts you can set up for the device. And so data point on change is going to refer to the specific data stream that we were talking about. So if you're looking for things like, data point on change would be DBM, right, or signal strength. If your signal strength varies and it doesn't go back to what it was supposed to, you can send an alert for it. Some pretty common ones are like if the device is online, fires a notification if the box hasn't reconnected to Remote Manager within 5 minutes, and then you can, up and down that number. The device name on change or excessive disconnects are also pretty popular. Say if the device disconnects for more than X amount of time in X amount of minutes, send an alert so the device is rebooting constantly, or it's the connection is really muddy and it keeps coming up and coming back down. And then I think one of the other ones is data point condition. And so this is when you use a little bit of math and you can say, hey, if my condition is greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, not equal, right, to a specific value, send that response for the data stream. And then you can reset that condition when it's gone back into compliance, or it's greater than or equal to, or whatever the specific value that you're looking for, right? And so once all this is set up and you've got your data point or your data stream that you're looking at to get the alert for, you can hit create. And then once that is created, you'll want to go over to admin and then click notifications. And then this is where you would assign your notification that you just, set the alert for to a specific email. And so with this, you can do things like send it to myself. You can send it to a distribution email list, which is pretty popular with like support. So whatever the distribution email is, you could throw it in there. And then you can curtail it based on what you want, right? So send a daily summary at 9 o'clock. send a notification for each individual alarm. And then the scope is based on what you're trying to send, right? So send notification for the following alarms. You type the alarm that you named it, what you want to send it in, or send notification for the alarm scoped within the following groups. And so as you break apart your organization into those groups and the group configs, you can also only notify yourself when specific groups get that alarm condition sent, so that you're not getting blasted with alerts from, however, thousands of devices you currently have, right? So yeah, once that's all said and done with the alerting, like I said, you choose who gets the email, whether it's one person, multiple people, or a distribution list of people. You can add and remove on this tab right here. You can enable versus disable it, which is going to turn the alerting on or off. And then, remove it all together, add a new one, all of that. So that's going to be alerting for the portal. Any questions on that so far?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, cool. So I'll move back to the 3.0 page. So one of the newest features we have in the portal is called automations. And so automations are essentially anything that you can do manually on the portal, we have a way to automate and do for you. Some really cool features I found with this, I'll kind of walk you through the process, are doing things like moving a bulk of devices from group A to group B. What's nice about that is you can do like firmware upgrades and schedule to do that at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Since everything on the portal kind of happens immediately, you don't want to take devices down for a firmware upgrade in the middle of the day. You can do an automation to schedule that, to happen in the middle of the night instead. So we can hit create. We'll name it whatever we want. And then what we'll do is we'll choose what's going to happen on a device. And so by default, it says ping. So you can ping a box if you want, not very useful. Some other things that you see in here, very extensive list, but some big ones are command line interface, device management. And so you can send command line interface prompts through the automation on devices as well. You can upgrade firmware. You can change device properties, which I'm going to pick for our current example. So add field, we want to move to a group. We're going to select the group that we want to move the devices to. So let's say I want to move them to that test group that I was working with earlier. We can hit save and continue. We turn it on. We say, hey, I want you to schedule this for right now. As soon as I'm done, run it. Or you can schedule it for a specific time in the future. And so as you see right here, we can pick 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We can go into the future and say, hey, do it on November at 9:30 in the morning, whatever, right? And then once that's done and you've scheduled it, you're going to select your targets. And so what we did earlier was we said, hey, my action is I'm going to move devices into this group. And this group has a group configuration applied to it that's going to update the firmware, change the config, whatever. So in here, we're going to select the targets for that automation to be applied to. And so you can choose a whole group, right? You can go in and say, hey, I want to move all of these devices into that group, and you can select as much as you want. The devices are able to be tagged, and so if you want to pick a specific tag for a group, you can select those tags and have those devices be applied to it. And then if you just have a specific device that you want to move over, or 2 or 3, you can go in and you can select the individual MAC addresses of the device and search for them up here to be moved over into that group that you want to update the config and update the firmware. And so once that's done, you hit OK, and then you hit save. And once that saves, this is going to go through on 11:11 at 9:30 in the morning, take these 1, 2, 3, 4 devices out of the current group they're in, move them into the next group, and then that group, if it has the config applied to it, will apply that config and update the firmware at 9:30 in the morning on November 11th. So lots of cool things you can do with the automations. Like I said, this is just, a very high level example of something that you can do, but you can go in with the automations, you can trigger remote commands, you can send the CLI and everything to do stuff on the box itself to give you more information. which is pretty powerful. So just, once you get a hand of it, you can tool around and make some changes on the portal with the automations tab and get some more information from that. And then obviously click on it, actions, run now, delete it. We'll get rid of it for now to move it out of the portal. All right. And then I guess the last thing we can talk about is the account settings. And so the account settings is basically how you're going to set up who has access to the portal and what kind of access do they have. So if we go into the users, you can see here, this is everyone with, administrative access to the portal. Obviously, we don't want to give everyone admin access. And so we can go into add a user, name them whatever you want. First name, last name, blah, blah, blah. All this information you drop into here. Give them a password, give them a login to get into the portal. And then you can choose the kind of access they have. So admin, like you saw, I have access to do everything. Command line interface changes on the console, change the firmware, change the config. Full access for admin. User is a more defined and restricted view, so they can't use the console. They can't do all of that, but they can go in and they can make config changes. Read only is exactly what it says. All you can do is view and look at everything. You cannot make changes to anything on the portal. And then application and read-only application are going to be involved with the API work. So don't give them access to the portal per se to make changes. So read-only for that. But they can go in and they can do API pulls and get some more information from the boxes that way. Besides the users and the kind of access they have in the portal, you can also do accounting. And the way you can do the accounting is do like sub accounts and groups off of this. And so the main group is going to be, who you have your name on that main group for that. But then from here, you can create sub accounts, company name, give them the account admin information here. And then you can choose how many devices you want to give them under their account. And that'll give them the licensing for all of that. Say, hey, I have 1,000 licenses. I'm going to give 20 to this account and then give the customer access to their own remote manager instance to manage their devices instead of us. So different ways to break it up. Obviously, on the account side, you have the grouping that you can push all the devices to and put them in specific groups. But then if a customer wants that access, you don't want to give them access to your account in their group that has all the devices. Just make them a sub account and then give them their own access with their own, little playground essentially. And then everything is going to be top down. So you can see into their group. So you can log into your access and then you can filter. It'll show up here where it says your name. So you can go in here and you can search for the account. And so obviously this one's the main account, but if the sub accounts were in here, you can go down and filter to that view so that you see what they see. Everything is containerized. So you can't like drop a config from the main account into the bottom account. But you can drop a device that has that config and then rip the config off the device using the group configuration settings we talked about earlier. So definitely ways to do stuff like that. But yeah, essentially that'll give you, their own specific access. They can go in and they can do whatever they want in the portal without affecting your giant organization of devices with, all your own configs and everything in there individually. All right. I guess at a high level, that is going to be pretty much everything in Remote Manager that we can mess with today. Is there any other examples or questions or anything we want to go over again while you guys still have me?
Hey, Justin, Tom here. There used to be two classes of admin user. The first admin that was set up was a super admin, and then everything was a sub admin. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so essentially you'll see here, there's the account administrator that has like complete access to everything, which means they can go in and they can delete other admins, right? This person cannot be deleted from the account essentially because it's their account. But yeah, and then everything else underneath is going to be just a regular administrator, which has all the same access as the account admin. It's just the account admin is like, the original account, right? Manager, and that's the person who's got full access to everything, can't be deleted. It's their account. They own everything in here. Everyone else is just someone with equal ability, but not equal standing, essentially.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions that are based on some emails that I saw fly around within the group. They may have already been answered, but one was core temp in the data stream. Some routers have it, some routers don't. Is that an issue on Digi side, or is that a configuration issue on our side? What's up with core temp?
So core temperature is, I believe, the temperature of the radio. So there's two temperatures actually, right? There's the core temp, which I believe is the radio, and the other one is the temperature of the modem itself. That should be a data stream that's presented. Like you saw, some of them don't get pushed right away. So like you'll only run into some of these. I'll have to double check. It might be a firmware thing where it's not getting all the information. So settings wise, if you want to go into system and then log, and then you can go into like the different kind of event categories and everything that gives this information. And this will show you everything that's being pushed. And then under the monitoring section, it'll have more information there. So let me do this really quick. So once it comes into Remote Manager, you'll have a device health option. And so some of the options that you see here are like only report changed values to Remote Manager. And so that's like the delta essentially. So you can turn that off, and then the data point tuning that you see right here is going to be like everything that's available. So system, there you go, core temperature, just make sure things like this are turned on. And that'll give you the data stream that you're looking for. Sometimes, by default, to be honest, I don't know if all of these are turned on. So just double check that one for me, make sure it's there. And then from there, you should be getting all of these as data streams. If not, we might want to turn off the delta and then push it more often to see if we get the information. But then, yeah, that should populate all in this tab. And then if it's not in this tab, we can also look in the older version of the portal. And this is the one I still use, to be honest, when I look at boxes. But we go to like device management, search for boxes that are online. This is going to run for a while because there's so many boxes. There we go. I can click on one. It gives data streams right here. And then this will give me the information that you're looking for too. And so this will have it all in here. And then you can search through this and scroll down, and it'll have a big, drop of information. Let me actually use a customer really quick because they have information that populates all the time in here. A better example per se. So yeah, this is what your device streams typically look like. And so you see like Wi-Fi, how much packets are transmitted over the Wi-Fi, var, temp, storage, how much is being used, things like that. Core temperature right here would be what you guys were referring to. So that should show up for you. Yeah, and then once again, all this is pullable via the API. So you can use this data stream to get the information to do an API pull. And then once again, also for the alerting, you can say, hey, is my core temp higher than 80 degrees Celsius? Let us know, reboot the box, something's on fire, right?
Perfect. Okay, good. Another question I saw was forcing an APN. So we have a 2-SIM install, SIM in slot 1, SIM in slot 2. We don't want to use the firmware APNs. We want to force an APN on a different APN on one of those SIMs. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So are we doing all this remotely, or is this a live install as well?
Probably given, I would say a live install.
Okay. So let me see if I can't move this box. Let me grab another example. So EX15. So a few ways you can do it. You can do it through the config, or you could also do it through the device itself. I'll show you on the hardware, and then I'll show you through the portal. So what you've got here is going to be the front of the device. And so, like you said, 2-SIM install, SIM A and SIM B are in 1 and 2. If you don't want to use SIM A in slot 1, you would press the SIM button, and it would bounce over to SIM slot 2. the way to notify yourself as to what's going on is going to be these lights at the very top. I know this doesn't really help much differentiator wise, but essentially you're looking at the box from the top down, so everything's upside down. So the 1 right here is going to be SIM slot 1, and the 2 right here is going to be SIM slot 2. So if this light is illuminated, that means the modem is identifying and using the SIM and SIM slot 1. And then similarly, if this is illuminated, you're going to be using the SIM and SIM slot 2. And then these lights right here are going to be indicating what your Ethernet connection actually looks like. So if we have something plugged into the LAN port, then we're going to have this illuminated. And then if there's something plugged into the WAN port, the second one's going to be illuminated. So SIM slot 1, SIM slot 2, Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2. And then on the portal, you can actually predefine based on your config how you want that to work. So if you go under network and then under modems and then modem again, this is where that information is going to be stored, right? So active SIM slot, you can say any, which will mean the device is going to use both. You can say SIM slot 1, which will literally lock the device down to only using SIM slot 1. And then similarly, SIM slot 2 will lock the device down to only come up and try to use SIM slot 2. So it's the extreme version of it. We have the preferred SIM slot option. And so if you were to say, hey, I want to prefer a SIM slot, which means I want it to fail over to the other one, but then bounce back after X amount of time. So you can predefine that and say, hey, I prefer SIM 1, but if it's going to fail over to SIM 2, that's fine. But I want it to set an interval, check on boot, set a specific time to bounce back and try SIM slot 1, right? So if you run into situations where the device is, using SIM 1 or SIM 2, and you're like, that's my overage card, I don't want that being used, bounce back to SIM 1, you could say, hey, at like 2 o'clock in the morning, bounce back, try SIM 1 and connect on that for the rest of the day. And then if something happens, it'll fail over to SIM 2, right?
Yep, that's helpful. And then the scenario that I was describing is I want to force an APN on SIM 1 and then force an APN on SIM 2. So how would I do that?
Yeah, so for that one, we'll probably want to set up specific modem interfaces. And so by default, we give you a modem interface, which is what you see right here. And so you can see we can, instead of match by anything, you can match by the SIM slot. And so if I say, hey, I want to match by SIM slot, it's going to say which SIM slot do you want to match by? SIM 1, we go into our APN list, add that APN in there. Now, what we need to do is we need to create a second SIM interface for the second SIM slot. So if I go into interface, what I'll do is I'll hit add. We'll call this modem 2. And then here, what you do is you'll say, all right, I want to, create a modem interface. I'm going to want to, go in and set the modem to be the second modem slot and then, match it exactly what we have in here. So modem external, modem, and then SIM slot. This will be SIM slot 2. And then we'll go in and we'll change the APN to be whatever you want for the APN. So it's got to be 2 separate modem interfaces, and then you're going to match by SIM slot and then, set it up from there.
Okay, yeah, very good. Thank you. I have another question from the field. They wanted a little bit more clarity on the Cat18 modem. It's got it's a 4 antennas, 4x4.
Yep.
So if we are doing external antennas, I think they wanted to know, can they use 2x2 antennas? So put one antenna on main aux 1 and then another antenna on main aux 2. Can you confirm that or walk us through best practice on setting up external antennas on a Cat18 4x4?
Yeah, so obviously if you're only using 2 antennas, the attenuation is going to go down for like the carrier aggregation abilities. So you're not going to get the best signal strength. The things that you need to worry about if you're only using 2 antennas on a 4 antenna radio, or like the open ports are still going to try and acquire signal. And so what happens is they typically pull like dirty signal, right? Like it's not very high quality, and it's, because you're not using the RF off of the blades to get the information that you want pushed down to the SMA connectors. We recommend capping them. So like they're like little SMA, plugs essentially that stop it from trying to connect to the outside RF available. And then for the actual extenders that you're using with the Cat 18, make sure those line up. So like you said, main 1, aux 1, main 0, aux 0. Make sure, one is on 0, the other one is on 1, right? Or sorry, one is on 0 for main and one is on 0 for aux. Don't mix and match, because those are two different terminating points on the module itself. So you don't want to mix and match those. And then on the open SMA connectors, you probably want to cap those off to stop any weird network transmission traffic going on.
Okay, just to summarize what you're saying, those are, I think, 2 install situations. In both cases, we're going to remove the blade and we're going to do an external antenna. Version 1 was a 2x2 external antenna. We would connect that to main 0, aux 0, the 2 SMAs from that external antenna, and then put dummy loads on the unused SMA, which would be main 1 and aux 1. That was one scenario that you described. If we do that, we lose the carrier aggregation features of Cat 18. So scenario 2 is we would use 2 external antennas, and we would not mix and match. One external antenna with the 2 SMA cables would be in main 0 and aux 0, and then the other antenna would be connected to main 1 and aux 1. Can you confirm that, those 2 scenarios?
Yep, that was perfect.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure, because we have we've learned how to use the signal strength data streams that have been quite useful, and even shelling into the box and using the lower level MMCLI commands to pull signal strength and more regularly, or more frequently, I should have said. And then, so we have some of these devices at the very edge of cell range. We are tweaking them to get the best possible connection.
Yeah, and then I just as a general rule of thumb for the boxes, the longer the cable for the external antenna, right, the more variance you get down the line. So I always recommend, if possible, try and move the box as close as you can to where you're trying to make the signal, and then make the cable coming off the external antenna as short as possible to help prevent any attenuation down that line, to degrade the signal, right? So that's why we, have like the little PoE injector and everything, because we say, hey, try to, treat the box like a plant, put it as close as you can to the light without putting it outside, and then anything past that, make that as short as possible.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, very good. I think that's all. I have API questions, but those are something I'll cover, I think, in an email instead of this group. So those are the things I remember from emails flying around. I don't know, Ismail or others on the call line. Do you have any questions? This is the time to ask Justin.
Okay, thanks for your questions, Tom. Very, very enlightening. Anybody else, please take this opportunity. We've had a wonderful presentation by Justin here, so this is the time, guys. We've had 36 people on this training. This has been very, very successful. Anybody else has any question, any doubt, anything that you would like to ask Justin? This is the time.
Shaq, David, Richard, any of the guys in North America? Any questions, clarifications?
Yeah, I have a question. How many Wi-Fi clients are supported by this model?
So that's a good question, actually. I don't think there's an upper limit. I want to say 32, just to be safe. So are you talking about like attachments or like SSIDs generated?
Exactly. No, the attachment.
Yeah, so like I said, it doesn't have an upper limit, right? What you're going to be constrained to is bandwidth allocation. So if everyone is connecting over Wi-Fi and you're doing things like transmitting email and something really low bandwidth cost, that you can have more. But then as soon as you run into like people are starting to stream YouTube or go on, Reddit or pull more stuff, they're going to be connected, but that bandwidth constraint is going to be really tight, and the connections are going to degrade for everyone based on what they're doing. So there's not a higher like limit saying, hey, I can't have more than like 50 or something, but I would say like between like 20 and 30 is probably safe. And then like I said, depending on what they're doing, if it's super low data, more the merrier. If they're doing something bandwidth heavy, you definitely want less people connected at one time.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi. Can you restrict or apply QoS to avoid that one user can consume all the bandwidth, or?
Yeah. So I think that's going to be under services. Where is QoS under? I know we have it. I haven't used it in a long time. But yeah, essentially you can go in and you can restrict the kind of access like you're saying. Typically we've used QoS for like VoIP phones, and the VoIP phones are, the ones who are getting the specific access or to the devices and what they're doing that way. But
I think in the firewall.
Is it under firewall?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there it is. Quality of service. Thank you. It's literally been so long since I've done this. But yeah, so the different policies that you have here, and then you can go in and you can add new ones, and it'll drop down below. So the first two that are in here by default are the inbound, outbound, which is what we've done for, like we said, the VoIP phones. So these are automatically configured for us on the device, turned off obviously, but then everything else is enabled underneath it. So if you want to redo those, you can do it, but you can also go in and you can just create new QoS roles and make the changes to what you want. So the way it's done through is you're going to choose the interface that you're restricting. So LAN 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, the modem interface, all of that. Choose the policy at which you want to apply it as. So the weight of the rule, so the lower, the more priority it gets, latency, obviously, and then, that'll run you through the full gambit of the QoS. So not heavyweight QoS, but definitely available on the device.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Justin. Quick question. I'm just going to circle back to one of Tom's questions with regards to the dual antennas.
Mm-hmm.
Should both antennas be pointing at the same tower, or should they be, let's say, for example, a tower is 15 kilometers away and another one's 20 kilometers away. Should they be pointing at the same tower or separate towers?
Yeah, so that one's a little tougher. I would definitely say point them at the same tower, but the problem is that we are beholden to the towers and who gives us connection from where, right? So we don't really have a good way of saying only use tower A, only use tower B, because we don't have a way to control that. The radio connecting to the tower is what's making that decision for us. So I would say work with the carrier in that situation to say, am I getting bumped off of tower A because it's in the middle of the day and everyone's on their phone, and that's what's pushing me over to tower B. And then from there you would say, all right, maybe I need to push 2 antennas this way and 2 antennas that way to try to make it a middle ground, because unfortunately we don't have any control over that kind of situation, right? We're stuck in the middle essentially of the two. And so based on what you're doing, and then you can also check on the device like band wise, like if tower A doesn't support all these bands but tower B does, you can look at the bands we're connecting to on the device and say, hey, I'm connecting on band 12 and 14 today, but the other day I was on 7 and 36 or something, right? And then you can know how often one is connecting to the other and then kind of triage that way. But yeah, unfortunately we just don't have a really good way of fixing that issue, because we're we're at the mercy of what the towers want us to do.
Okay. Thank you.
I might want to add on that, because if you point to the two antennas, one tower and the other two antennas, they're encapsulated into one flat pack, so it looks like one antenna, but there's two in there. If you were if you're point one at one tower and then let's say it's 45 degrees off to another tower, you're going to lose a lot of the Cat 18 capabilities, or even any of the LTE advanced, so that'd be Cat 6 and above. You're not going to do any band aggregation, which is called carrier aggregation, which is unfortunate. It's really aggregating the bands, so you're going to lose that capability, and then you're also going to lose the enhanced QAM, the number of signals that the modem is processing will be reduced dramatically if you're off two different towers. It won't know what to do and it won't do it. So it would be an extreme case, and then you might be bouncing between two towers, and then you've got all sorts of other registration and latency issues. So that's not advisable. It would be an extreme practice if you were to do something like that.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Justin.
Okay, anybody else? This is the last chance. I want to thank Digi. I want to thank Rosie and Justin for this training. I want to thank all the participants. It has been very, very enlightening, very interesting. We do appreciate it very much, because Digi is our brand. It is the brand we work with. So the more we know about it, the more we understand it, the better for all of us. So thank you all so very much. And Justin, we may come back to you if we have any questions arising after this. I really appreciate your time, and same for you, Rosie. Thank you very much. Thanks to Digi.